How to Create a Glitch Monologues Season 34 Chapter 3. This is Season 34 of How to Create a Glitch in the Matrix Monologues Episode 3. In this episode, we will be talking about narratives of history. As explained in a previous podcast, narratives are the intersubjective manifestation of our impulses, be they affirmatory or negating. As an impulse is expressed in language, either affirmatory or negating, it generates a minor narrative, which has the capacity to transmit that affirmational or negating nature to another consuming individual. But narratives are not segmented, rather, can be coupled together through the work of composing a historical account of an event. These podcasts are my narrative history, a collation of my experiences and the product of some exegesis and synthesis of those experiences. Each of us generate narrative when we transmit that which we experience into language. Those narratives, to the extent they are negated by their interaction with other minds, or affirmed, becoming integrated into the holistic narratives of history. A narrative contains an archetypal constellation, a catalogue, an arrangement, of the ultimate archetypes, with their alignments to given symbolic ideals. Most narratives do not extend into the esoteric, but rather, entail a manifestation of the personal, contextual, into the ascendant, archetypal and symbolic. These narratives, when they comprise all aspects of the supraspatial plates, represent larger narratives, the narratives of peoples, of states, of nations, of the world. These narratives represent a particular alignment of a given set of symbolic ideals associated with archetypal forms. An ideology is nothing more nor less than a particular arrangement or alignment of archetypal forms with symbolic forms. An embedding of the milieu of a culture. That being said, a narrative tells of a particular arrangement of these forms, a particular constellation, with symbolic alignments linked to the narrative resolution. Now, any given person has a particular orientation to these global narratives, created by the given ideologies which underpin their action, thought and behavior. This means that the ability to craft a narrative, to be heard by some audience, is the power to reorient that audience according to the narratives, alignments and ideals of the former. Thus, this tells us that there are different levels of narrative. There are different levels of ideology, of which it is fair to say the scientific is a part. When those different levels are integrated into a global narrative, they generate a particular reorientation of the listener, which happens unconsciously. Let me give you an example. Suppose you are talking to someone who is fundamentally not a behaviorist, that is, they believe in the genetic basis of behavior. But they are politically aligned with anarchism. These are ideological orientations which bespeak a particular narrative of history and view of history. These two lenses become the projection of a particular narrative arrangement, an alignment of every story or character of history, from Jesus to John F. Kennedy. All the figures of history become embedded in a particular view of historical events. These narratives, thus, to the extent that they conflict with the narratives that one takes for granted about history, represent an opportunity to flip the polarity of one's archetypal constellation. The result being, that in the process of listening to the story of the speaker, one becomes reoriented relative to the figures of history, according to associated symbolic alignments. Now, let's look at the converse case. If we all assume that the narratives that we have been taught in school are foundational, accurate representations of what actually happened, then we will embed our particular archetypal vocabulary in those narratives, which become capable of forging gateways between us and others. These common signposts represent our ability to engage with others, forge common representations and perceive meaning. The moment that we take on a particular dialectical arrangement of archetypal figures and ideals, is the moment that we become incapable of forging commonalities in thought with those around us. In effect, a recidivist view of history is one which is reactionary, precisely because it depends upon the same global narratives, rather than a reorientation of those narratives. This creation of a history is foundational to the formation of the capacity for reorienting the audience's archetypal alignments to a particular ideological polarity. There are limitations in this method, however. The integration of one's narratives with one's view of ideology and science being one. Without said integration, the impact of one's attempt at the generation of a true history will be ineffective in producing an ideological reorientation in the audience. But that being said, integration of one's view of science and theory, once integrated into one's view of history, can alter the natural organization of one's internal architecture according to a particular view of behavior. That's the end of the podcast for today. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment and subscribe.